Amen. Thank you. It really does make a huge difference to have an audience, so I appreciate it. I wanted to mention one more time that I sent this out to the email list, but wanted to mention a group called Faith Matters is sponsoring a book launch. The book is entitled At One-ment by Thomas McConkie, who's kind of an interesting guy. And that's going to be on Saturday, December 9th from 7 to 8:30. If you want more information, it's in Salt Lake, 75 South, 2nd East, the Wasatch Retreat Center. I think it's part of the Episcopal Church there. Not sure. But he's repeating it again Sunday, June 7th in Midway. So if that works better, you might want to look up Eventbrite is the place that you can get tickets. But if you Google Faith Matters Thomas McConkie, you'll get information. Okay. There were just two things that I didn't get to last week, so two sentences before we started this week. And one is Revelation chapter 17. I tripped over this and said, oh, I like that. That's really cool how that works. You know, we had that lesson on time talking about how Jehovah, in writing about him in the book of Revelation, John will talk about past, present, and future tense. Notice in chapter 17, verse 8, as it speaks about the beast ascending out of the bottomless pit. It was and is not. And they beheld the beast that was and is not and yet is. Can you see how that's an absolute opposite of the verbs used to describe Christ? So that's another indication of the anti-Christ. I think I didn't get a chance to connect the four horsemen. You have death, and then you have famine, pestilence, and the sword. And the sword obviously represents war and military power. But those of us who have not lived through a war, where we are probably not as acquainted with the economic and agricultural total breakdown of all the systems during war, resulting in famine. And if you look at Germany and Holland and Poland and et cetera at the end of World War II, they were quite literally all starved to death. There was something like 800 calories a day per person is all that they had. England was only like 1,200, but war just destroys so many things. And of course, pestilence of all kinds. As groups of people mix and come in contact with each other, the diseases just spread everywhere. And probably the most famous, at least in our recent history, is the absolute devastation of the Native Americans when the Europeans arrived. They say that something like 90 to 95% of the Native Americans on the eastern coastline died in the first 10 years of the arrival of the Europeans. The other thing that I didn't mention was in chapter 14, we had talked about a lot of the imagery and sound of the liturgy that is depicted in the book of Revelation, of the worship going on at the temple with what is being said and the music and the words of the songs and the instruments. But, and that's shown again in chapter 14. It happens over and over and over. Let's just summarize here, maybe the first 5 verses. You have the Lamb standing on Mount Zion. There's 144,000 with him that have the Father's name on their foreheads. A voice speaks from heaven, a voice of many waters, a voice of thunder, the voice of harpers harping on their harps. That is so Hebrew. You get the verb, harping, and the person who's doing it, harper, and the object that they're using, harp, and they're all the same word, and it's like judging righteous judgment that judges do that. That's just how the language works, so it's a Hebraism there. They sang, as it were, a new song before the throne. These are the redeemed, but what I really want you to notice is some of the descriptions used to describe temple worship in the book of Revelation. And I want you to think about temple worship today. So, one is, these are they which are not defiled with women, for they are virgins. Now that's a different way to describe chastity. It's not defiled with women in general. It's not describing people who don't have a wife or children, because having children is part of the covenant blessing. So you have to step back from celibacy in the context of the covenant. These are they which follow the Lamb whithersoever he goeth. So you see a kind of obedience there. They were redeemed from among men, being the first fruits unto God and to the Lamb. The first fruits are brought to the temple, laid on the altar as a sacrifice. If you go to Omni, it talks about laying your first fruits on the altar, and that's how I felt as I took each of my sons to the MTC, laying them on the altar. In their mouth was found no guile, exact words, right? For they are without fault. They have been pronounced clean. Sometimes we recognize how different temple worship was in the past. I hope that this kind of language helps you see how similar temple worship still is. Okay, now we're going to talk about the woman in the book of Revelation, chapter 12 and chapters 17, 18, and on into 19. What I want to start with is the problematic nature of feminine imagery. Through all the history of the world, we've had problems with how women are depicted. And I was just looking at some old advertisements from the 1950s. Absolutely appalling, the imagery used of women. Not that it got much better in the 60s. And then there's the covers of science fiction novels or superheroes and the problems there. Even the presence of women. When you look at a lot of movies, there's not a single woman in some of them. And there's a contest, and I'm forgetting the name of it, that you judge movies by. And there have to be at least 2 named women in a movie, and they need to have a conversation with each other about something other than a man. And if it passes that critical level, it gets a star. And of course the Temple film doesn't cross that. Doesn't meet that standard. We still have a problem in the church with the very presence of women and where they are seen. Recently, the area presidency over the Western United States decided that women should not sit on the stand which has been a tradition in many states and wards, especially in California, for decades, that the Relief Society president, or the stake Relief Society president, or Young Women's president, or primary president might sit on the stand. And you'll notice that we do that at conference, right? The women's leaders are all seated there. But for some men, that presence is problematic and they just want to get rid of it. Just move the women out of the scene. There was a really interesting response to it. I very much enjoyed it. And the suggestion was made of, why don't we just have everybody on the stand go sit in the congregation? Do we really need to have the bishop and the high councilman and et cetera sit on the stand every week at every meeting? Why can't they go and sit and worship with their families? Why don't we only have the speakers? I mean, I don't know what your ward is like, but even our choir director comes up and down. In some wards, even the pianist or organist sits with their family until it's time to play. And I thought that was kind of interesting, that who needs to sit in the high seats of honor? Who is allowed to sit there? Someone did a very interesting study about a month ago. They took pages and pages and pages of advertising in the Western United States, looking at men's clothing and women's clothing in the current cultural context. And the question they asked was, looking at each piece of clothing depicted, if you had been to the temple and were keeping your covenants, could you wear that clothing? 90% of the women's clothing, the answer was no. 100% of the men's clothing, the answer was yes. This did not include swimsuits or sports apparel. But what does that say to us? I believe, and I can't be absolutely sure because I don't know exactly who did the survey, I believe the purpose of the study may have been to try to push for different standards for women in the church so that they could be more fashionable and fit into our society better. Get rid of the double standard that requires women to be the ones that look peculiar. And men they've been able to fit into any society as temple attending members without a problem. But actually, what this study shows is how warped our culture is. That objectifies women so completely that 90% of the clothing is clearly either just immodest or sexualized. And yet, many in our culture, and even members of the church, do not see that as a problem. That idea is buying into Babylon. And I hope that you'll come to recognize through our discussion of the woman that sexualization and the male gaze and those kinds of issues are associated with Babylon all through the scriptures. Now, as we talk about women, you also need to think about the multivalent nature of symbols. When we're talking about women, we're not talking about women. Okay? We're talking about everyone. The bride is not just women. The 10 virgins were not just women. Those represent the entirety of the church, men and women. And as we describe Babylon, the great whore, it's not just women that participate in that culture. Probably even more men than women are involved in Babylon. I don't know that that's true, but we'll find out. Some women are referenced by name, and that helps, but there's like 3. And they become, since they're so rare, the named women are so rare, and this is in the Bible as well as in the book of Revelation, as well as in the Book of Mormon. There are 6 women who are named in the entire Book of Mormon. And 2 of them aren't in America, in the Book of Mormon, right? It's actually 3. Well, you got Eve, you've got Mary, and then you have a type from Israel. But some of those that are named actually don't just represent women. And that includes Mary and Eve and Jezebel. In the Book of Mormon, she's the harlot that attracts Orient. But in the Old Testament, she is the non-Jewish, she's a Phoenician wife of King Ahab. She lives at the time of Elijah, and it is Jezebel who has brought in all of the priests from her religion, her worship of Baal, all those 850 priests of Baal that are up on top of Mount Carmel. Those are all Jezebel's priests. So when Elijah has them all killed, she's ticked. And she goes after Elijah. And that's why he runs and goes to Mount Sinai, 40 days in the wilderness without food. That moment is precipitated by Jezebel. I wanted to mention what her name means, because looking it up in a dictionary of names is rather confusing. Jezebel is the biblical name. Nobody names their daughters Jezebel anymore. But we do name daughters Isabel or Isabella. And it's the same name. So I wouldn't recommend it just because of what it represents. You will look it up in a dictionary and it will say that Isabella means chaste. No, it does not. This is Jezebel, and it's which means not, and Zebel, which means an enclosed or a walled city. So Jezebel doesn't shut the gates. Anyone can come in. This is not a good description of chaste. Okay? So just so you know what the name means and how that name gets associated with Babylon, the whore, the great harlot that sits upon the waters. That is a type all the way through the Bible and the Book of Mormon. On the other hand, in Revelation 12, we see her, Jezebel is the antitype. The great type is Revelation chapter 12. There appeared a great wonder in heaven, a woman clothed with the sun, the moon under her feet, and upon her head a crown of 12 stars. Sun and the moon and the stars in this woman. We have seen a statue depicting that woman in virtually every museum of Europe. And as you look at it, let's continue on with it. Verse 2, she being with child cried, travailing in birth and pain to be delivered. And then the dragon comes with his tail, ready to devour her child as soon as it is born. And she brought forth a man-child who was to rule all nations with a rod of iron, quoting from Psalm number 2. And her child was caught up unto God and to his throne, and the woman fled into the wilderness. Every single statue that we saw, it was clearly Mary, the mother of Jesus, that they were depicting as the woman clothed in the sun standing on the moon and holding stars in her hand. And usually down by the moon would also be perhaps waters and a reflection, because she is connected with the water of life. She is the fountain of living waters. But there's also under her foot a serpent. So that's 3 different biblical images put together in that one statue. You've got Revelation chapter 12 with this ambiguous woman. You've got Mary as the mother of Jesus, and you've got Eve stepping on the serpent's head, right? And the thing we need to recognize is they are all the same woman. This is the righteous woman. This is wisdom. And her antithesis is Jezebel. They are wisdom and folly, the bride and the whore, Zion and Babylon. Now, when I first started teaching in the book of the Old Testament, we talked about the themes of 2 brothers and 2 cities. And that was like Genesis chapter 5. We're back to the 2 cities. It's that same theme that's been running through. And you remember in Genesis, both cities even had the same name. Both were the city of Enoch. So in the Doctrine and Covenants, we have bringing not only New Jerusalem coming at the end of with the second coming of Christ and the end of the millennium and establishment of God's kingdom, but the city of Enoch and the city of New Jerusalem. Now, it doesn't mention that Zion is coming back. The Zion of Enoch is coming back in the Old Testament or the New Testament. But, hey, Joseph Smith is going to restore all things, right? He's going to pull all these threads back together, which I just love. Jezebel is actually named in Revelation chapter 2. In one of the cities has, let's see, verse, I think it's 20. Notwithstanding, is that right? Yeah, I have a few things against thee, because thou sufferest that woman Jezebel, which calleth herself a prophetess, to teach and seduce my servants to commit fornication and eat things sacrificed to idols. Now, it's important to remember that what he's describing there is not what we would call prostitution. It's actually a description of worship in the Greek and Roman temples. And so it's combining religion in a way that we don't see religion anymore. And yet the Book of Mormon is going to connect in a brilliant, brilliant way. We have the church of the righteous, and we have the great and abominable church. And the one is Zion, and the other is Babylon. And so there are contrasts between different ways of worshiping. And so that's an element here. And it's not just women that go bad. Okay. I think that's everything on that page. So what I'm going to do now is something I will send out, because it's pretty dense, and we're going to fly through it. I've made a type copy. This is the quotations about folly, or Babylon, or Jezebel, and then I have 3 pages about the bride, the woman, the daughter of Zion. And these are all taken from the Old Testament, so that you can see what's coming into the minds of the members, the people in John's day, when he says what he does in the book of Revelation. Where do their heads go in their scriptures? It's to the Old Testament, because that is their scriptures. And virtually everything in the book of Revelation, I hope you've noticed in the 6 weeks, every symbol in there is taken from the Old Testament. So we're going to fly through a little bit here. The Antichrist image of the woman is probably most, what's the word I want to think of? Most intricately described in the book of Proverbs. Wisdom is mentioned in Proverbs chapter 3, but wisdom and folly are contrasted in chapters 7, 8, and 9. If you haven't read those chapters lately, go and read them, because it is contrasting the worship of the foolish woman and how she calls men to worship at her house and drink her wine, versus the worship of wisdom, who has built her house and raised its pillars and so forth. Folly is the strange woman. She comes and beckons young men, simple ones, youths, a young man void of understanding, and she beckons to him in the twilight, in the dark night. And it's a woman with the attire of a harlot and subtle of heart. She is loud and stubborn. Her feet do not abide in her house. She's outside in the street, lying wait at every corner. Can you see what the culture was like in the Old Testament times? Very much like what we see in very strict Islam. Women do not go outside. They are not out of their house without a man, a brother, a husband, a father accompanying them. That's just totally inappropriate. You know, at one time Randy thought he might go to work in Saudi Arabia. We would have made a lot of money. But those rules still apply, which meant I would have been in the house, unable to go anywhere when he was at work. Not even meet with other women, not even, I mean, in the compounds, I'm sure there is some freedom and access, as there is in Qatar now, and yet very much the same kind of culture. So a woman who goes out of her house without a husband, a father, or a brother is immediately branded as a harlot. And we saw in the refugees coming out of Afghanistan and Iran and Iraq, women who were running for their lives because the people in their neighborhood had decided they must be harlots. Various reasons. But you know what you do with harlot? You kill her. And so they were literally running for their lives. Now it goes on and talks about this woman. She catches him, kisses him. She says, I have peace offerings. I came forth to meet just you. I have decked my bed. I have perfumed my bed with myrrh and aloes and cinnamon. Let us take the fill of our love for the good man, my husband's not home. He's gone on a business trip. You can come and be safe. Nothing has changed. With such fair speech, she caused him to yield. With the flattering of her lips, she forced him. He goeth after her straightway, as an ox goes to the slaughter, or a fool to the correction of the stocks, till a dart strikes through his liver, as a bird hastens to the snare, not knowing that it is his life on the line here. Now, of course, the blame is all being placed on the woman, because it's all her fault. But at least it acknowledges that choosing this path, this city, this woman, leads to death. And the wise man won't go there. And so, don't let your heart decline in her ways. Go not astray in her paths, for she has cast down many wounded. Many strong men have been slain by her. Her house is the way to hell. That's pretty clear in the book of Proverbs. Chapter 8, on the other hand, begins, doth not wisdom cry? Isn't there another voice that you hear in the city? Isn't there another woman who would like you to come? She standeth in the top of the high places, in the way in the places of the path. She calleth, crieth at the gates, and coming out of the doors. Unto you, man, I call, my voice is to the sons of men, you simple, and come and understand wisdom. I will speak of excellent things. My mouth will speak truth. The words of my mouth are righteousness. Receive my instruction, not silver. Knowledge is better than gold. Wisdom is better than rubies. And so it continues and goes on to talk about how God was with wisdom from the creation of the world. And then chapter 9, wisdom hath built her house. She's hewn out her 7 pillars. She's killed her beasts. There's always a sacrifice at the temple. Whose meat are you going to eat? At the profane Greek and Roman temples, or are you going to eat at God's house? When you take an animal for a burnt offering, the 4 parts are offered, but you take the rest of the meat home. Which butcher shop are you going to go to? She's mingled her wine, furnished her table, she sent forth her maidens. Come, eat of my bread, drink of the wine which I have mingled. Forsake the foolish and live. Go in the way of understanding. The fear of the Lord is the beginning of wisdom. Knowledge of the holy is understanding. So this woman that is wisdom has a temple, just as the woman who is folly has her temple, her house. Which one are you going to buy into? And which city are you going to live in? And that's how the story goes. In Zephaniah chapter 3, starting at verses 1 to 7, if you want to read Zephaniah. Woe to her that is filthy and polluted, the oppressing city. Can you see the theme here? She obeyeth not the voice, she receiveth not correction, she trusteth not in the Lord, she drew not near to her God. That is temple language. To draw near, it means to approach the temple and to give offerings at the temple. She didn't do that. The princes within her are roaring lions. Now, I find it fascinating that lions are associated with Babylon, if you think about Daniel in the lion's den. And eagles are going to be associated with Zion. Probably 30 years ago, I was researching about eagles and lions because the symbol fascinated me. And I found virtually every use of lion in the Old Testament has to do with judgment or justice. Whereas eagles are associated with mercy. And so you will see those two concepts that are so important of being cut off and in trouble because you've broken the law. That's associated with Babylon, certainly in the book of Revelation. But the eagles are mercy. It's eagles that pick up and carry the woman in chapter 12 away from the dragon that is threatening her, out into the wilderness. I hope that you don't associate wilderness with terrible things. Wilderness is the 40 years in the wilderness of the Exodus is actually considered in many ways to be the honeymoon. That Israel, as it is a newborn coming out of Egypt through the waters of the Red Sea, goes to the house of the Lord, the mountain of the Lord's house, and makes covenants with him. And they spend the time together in the wilderness. And then when they get to the Jordan River, they cross over and it becomes more of they're scattered. And they're no longer right there at that house. Now, in the description in the book of Numbers, when you read about traveling in the wilderness in Exodus, you're going to hear about 3 tribes that are on each side of the tabernacle. So watch for that image to come up in Revelation. Last week, this is back to Zephaniah 3. Her priests have polluted the sanctuary. They have done violence to the law. The unjust know no shame. Remember how I talked about the keep last week, the central tower inside of the walled city? The most protected and holy place, that would be the Holy of Holies in the city of Jerusalem. But with folly, their towers are desolate. There is no inhabitant. Their dwellings will be cut off. In Isaiah chapter 10, the daughter of Zion has become unfaithful. And God will shake his hand against the mount of the daughter of Zion, the hill of Jerusalem. Now, you need to recognize some of the imagery here. Mount, or mountain, is Har, as in Har Megiddo, Mount Megiddo, or the hill of Megiddo. Har comes from the verb hara, H-R-H, which is the Hebrew verb that means to be pregnant. When a woman is pregnant, she becomes mountainous. That image kind of worked for you there. So as you talk about the holy hill of the Lord, the daughter of Zion, the daughter of Jerusalem, it's his pregnant wife that he is protecting. And that's Revelation chapter 12, right? Now, in your mind, you have to let go of, is the woman the bride of Jehovah? Or is the woman the mother of Jehovah? Yes. It's all the same symbol, all the same person. She's a mother and she is a virgin. That is not a problem in the book of Revelation or in Scripture. So how do we understand the concept of virginity if mothers can be virgins? Okay, good luck with that. Okay, in Ezekiel 23, we have an extended portion that talks about Israel, the kingdom to the north, and Judah, the kingdom to the south, as 2 whoring sisters. Israel to the north, this is how this thing begins, chapter 23, verse 2. Son of man, there were 2 women, the daughters of one mother. They committed whoredoms in Egypt. They committed whoredoms in their youth. Israel played the harlot when she was mine. Mine means she's married to Jehovah. They have a covenant. And she walks away from that covenant and doted on her lovers, the Assyrians, her neighbors. Who is it that attacks the northern kingdom of Israel? Takes them into captivity? That's the Assyrians. And then, verse 17. The Babylonians came to Judah into the bed of love, and they defiled her, and she was polluted with them. She has walked in the way of her sister, therefore I will give her the cup of mine hand. Thou shalt drink of thy sister's cup deep and large. Thou shalt be laughed to scorn and derision. Thou shalt be filled with drunkenness and sorrow, the cup of astonishment and desolation, the cup of thy sister Samaria. So, Judah, if you want to follow in the paths that Israel did, fine, you're going to get the same thing, bitter cup to drink from. Watch for the bitter cup in the book of Revelation. You've got the whore sitting on the many waters, and she has the cup of her wrath. And there's a cup that she drinks. Ezekiel 28 describes consumption and commercialism as violence and trafficking. It actually uses that word, traffic. So Ezekiel 28, verse 16. By the multitude of thy merchandise they have filled the midst of thee with violence, and thou hast sinned. Why might merchandise bring violence? Theft, robbery, selling drugs to get the money to buy the merchandise, getting merchandise from people's houses to sell on the black market. I mean, you can find all kinds of ways that merchandise is associated with sin. Therefore, I will cast thee out as profane, out of the mountain of God. Thine heart was lifted up because of thy beauty. Now that's relating back to Isaiah chapter 14, where it talks about Lucifer, the king of Babylon, being lifted up in his pride. And he says, I will sit on the throne of God. I will reign. And of course, you know how that turns out for the king of Babylon. He ends up in a pit. The same thing is true for the woman, Babylon. She's lifted up because of her beauty, but I will cast thee to the ground. I will lay thee before kings, and they'll look at you. This is the same language as describing Lucifer. You defiled your sanctuaries by the multitude of thine iniquities and by the iniquity of thy trafficking. Therefore I will bring a fire in the midst of thee and devour thee and bring thee to ashes in the sight of all of them. Leviticus chapter 21, verse 9. The daughter of a priest, if she profane herself by playing the whore, she hath profaned her father, she shall be burned with fire. So, because Babylon is setting herself up as a prophetess, as a priestess, as a religion, claiming to be, the church of the great abominable church, claiming to be holy, because it makes that claim, its destruction must be by fire. That's the law in the Old Testament. In Jeremiah 51, this is an extended portion. I should do Isaiah first. How the faithful city has become a harlot. It was full of judgment.
Isaiah what?
Isaiah chapter 1. This is verse 21. Righteousness used to live in it, and now murderers. Silver has become dross. Wine is mixed with the water. They follow after gifts and rewards. That's bribery. They judge not the fatherless, nor care for the cause of the widow, and I will turn my hand upon thee. Purge thy dross, take away thy sin. They shall be ashamed of the oaks which you have desired, and confounded for the gardens you have chosen. You shall be as an oak whose leaf fadeth, and as a garden that hath no water. Can you see this is a reversal of the image of the Garden of Eden with rivers flowing out of it and trees of life. But the word for oak, you probably don't know, it's Ella. It's the feminine form of the word God. So the feminine divine is depicted as a tree through all our books of scripture. But here the tree is now dead. The whore of Babylon in Jeremiah 51 is a destroying mountain. I will raise up against Babylon and cause them that dwell in the midst of them to rise up against me, a destroying wind. Flee out of the midst of Babylon. He will render unto her a recompense. Babylon hath been a golden cup in the Lord's hands that hath made all the earth drunken. Babylon is suddenly fallen and destroyed. Howl for her. Thou that dwellest upon the many waters, abundant in treasures. Thou that destroyest all the earth, O destroying mountain. They shall not take of thee a stone for the corner, nor a stone for foundations. Babylon has no cornerstone. It has no stone foundation. She shall be desolate forever. The broad walls of Babylon shall be utterly broken, the high gates burned with fire. Thou shalt bind a stone to it and cast it into the midst of the Euphrates. Watch for that image in Revelation. Now, I was thinking of, thus shall Babylon sink and not rise again. I was thinking about a destroying mountain. You've got the mountain of the Lord's house, which is the temple, which is the greatest thing there is. It's the source of water. I mean, that's our source of water, right? All that snow up there on Timp and Mount Wolfer. We understand mountains as good things. They stop the wind from carrying us away. The number of times that a tornado has hit in Salt Lake, it can be counted probably on one hand. That's because of the protecting mountains. When the clouds are crossing, they hit the mountains and drop the rain, which is why Salem gets significantly more rainfall than the rest of the Wasatch Front, because we capture it in this little corner here. How else do mountains destroy? Well, mountains were made by earthquakes, generally. So they're associated with earthquakes. And if you go into mountainous countries like Turkey and Iran and Iraq, earthquakes are very common there. We're on the Wasatch Fault, right? We recognize that. The mountains are volcanoes. And in ancient times, boy, that's a destroying mountain. There are landslides when you get too much rain or it melts too quickly. And I don't know if you've seen in times past, entire hillsides washed away and thousands of people dead and buried under that flood. Mountains can be either image, right? You can have the mountain of the Lord's house or the destroying mountain. You can have the fountain of many waters, or you can have floods. You can have pregnancy and children and rejoice in your posterity, or you can be left desolate with no one. Make your choice, right? You should read Numbers chapter 5. This describes, it's called the ordeal of jealousy. And the idea is that if a married man believes his wife has been unfaithful to him, in the culture, does she have a voice? Absolutely not. Nobody's going to believe her. And so the Lord sets up this ritual through which she can be exonerated by men, by God himself. And she is brought to, and the thing that's important here is we don't know if the woman has committed adultery or not. We know the man is jealous. If it is hid from the eyes of her husband and there's no witness, and the spirit of jealousy comes upon him, then the man shall bring his wife to the priest. And he has to bring a huge offering. It's quite expensive. And the priest shall bring her near and set her before the Lord. The priest shall take holy water in an earthen vessel and dust from the floor of the tabernacle and put it into the water. The priest shall charge her with an oath, and then he writes the oath, the curses, on a piece of parchment, and he then washes the curse off the parchment into the water of the cup, and she drinks it. It's called the bitter water. And if she has been unfaithful, it says that her belly will sag and her thigh shall rot. She'll get a venereal disease if she has been unfaithful. If she has not been unfaithful, and if she is clean, then she shall conceive seed. And if the woman is not defiled, but is clean, she shall go free. Now, I think this is really interesting, because at no time do we really know whether or not the woman has actually been unfaithful. But if she's been unfaithful enough that she contracts a venereal disease, that's the evidence against her. If, on the other hand, even if she's been unfaithful, if she is pregnant, she is forgiven and exonerated. And the man will raise that child as his own. I find it fascinating that God has chosen the life of that child and how it will be treated in the community over the reality of whether or not it's the man's child. What really matters to God? Raise the kid. Have the child. Fascinating. Anyway, that's known as the law of sotah, the drinking of the bitter water and the getting dust off the floor of the tabernacle. I think that that is what is being referenced when Jesus is confronted with the adulterous woman and he writes in the dust of the floor of the tabernacle. I think that's a connection. In Isaiah 59, it says, the earth is defiled and polluted. Isaiah 24:5, the earth is defiled under the inhabitants thereof. They have transgressed the laws, changed the ordinance, broken the everlasting covenant. Therefore, the curse has devoured the earth. The city of confusion is broken down. Confusion is Babel. So when you talk about the Tower of Babel, it's confusion, a confusion of languages. That is the biblical source for the name of the country Babylon. Babel is to confound and to mix up. Anyway, how does the city pollute the earth? And I just wrote a few things down. When you think about the commerce and merchandise, mines, oil wells, fracking, polluting factories, and the waters that they dump their refuse into, corporate farms and feedlots, logging, overfishing, agricultural fertilizers washing into our rivers, the paving of our farmland into roads and cities, pesticides and herbicides that are killing the land. All of those things are being done for only one reason, and that's money and greed. That is what God considers violence to the earth. It's as if earth itself is being raped by the men living on her, and that would include women. Then you get the death of the bride. Jeremiah 7:33 to 34. The carcasses of this people shall be meat for the fowls of heaven and for the beasts of the earth, and none shall drive them away. I will cause to cease from the cities of Judah and from the streets of Jerusalem the voice of mirth, the voice of gladness, the voice of the bridegroom, the voice of the bride. The land shall be desolate. As you read through that paper, and I'll send it out to each of you, what I hope you'll do is cross-reference it to all of those images in the book of Revelation and how all of that is quoted in the book of Revelation. This is from that same set of pictures from the seminaries and institutes. And it depicts Babylon and the merchants in Babylon. But if you look closely, you'll find these are such stereotypes of Arabs and Jews, of slaves, of women and jewelry. It's just covered with stereotypes. Good luck with that. So I'll send you that one. Now we get to change direction and read about wisdom. Proverbs chapter 3. Now, we sing about the wise and foolish man, right? One builds his house on the sand, the other his house on the rock. That is certainly New Testament imagery. But the Old Testament version of that same story is the wise and foolish women and the houses that they build. So the wise woman builds her house on the rock, right, which is Christ. And wisdom is in her temple, as you read through Proverbs 7 to 9. Wisdom, chapter 3 of Proverbs, is a tree of life to those that lay hold upon her. Job, chapter 3, verse 4. Now this one really fascinating. The Spirit of God hath made me. The breath of El Shaddai, it says the Almighty, but the Hebrew is El Shaddai, hath given me life. Remember, El Shaddai means a God with breasts. Both breath and spirit are feminine words. This is implying that there is some aspect of God that is feminine that has given birth to you. In speaking of Eve, in Zephaniah chapter 3, it talks about the time before the Tower of Babel, when there was still a tree of life and wisdom was still there. I will turn people to a pure language. You hear the Adamic language before the time of Babel? They may call upon the name of the Lord and serve him with one consent. That's what Zion before this confusion. House in Hebrew, which is Beth. So house, and that can either be your house, where your family lives, or the house of the Lord, which is the temple. They're both the same word, is Beth, B-T-H. But that is also a Hebrew word for family. Noah and all his house went off to the ark. It uses Beth. And it is also the Hebrew word for daughter. So, every time you hear the phrase, the virgin daughter of Jerusalem, it's also talking about the unviolated, holy temple in the center of Jerusalem, which is a symbol of the daughter. And the daughter is the house. Both Micah in chapter 4 and Isaiah in chapter 2, let me read those to you. In the last days, these are both the same. I don't know if you've noticed, and we don't know who wrote this first, whether Micah is quoting Isaiah or whether Isaiah is quoting Micah. No idea. In the last days it shall come to pass that the house of the Lord shall be established in the tops of the mountains. It shall be exalted above the hills, and people shall flow unto it. Nations will say, Come, let us go up to the mountain of the Lord, to the house of the God of Jacob. He will teach us his ways. We will walk in his paths. The law shall go forth from Zion, the word of the Lord from Jerusalem. He will judge among many people, rebuke strong nations far off. They shall beat their swords into plowshares, their spears into pruning hooks. Nation shall not lift up sword against nation, neither shall they learn war anymore. In that day, saith the Lord, I will assemble her that halteth, I will gather her that has been driven out, and her that I have afflicted. I will take her that halted a remnant, and her that was cast off in a strong nation, and the Lord shall reign over them in Mount Zion from henceforth forever. O thou tower of the flock, the stronghold of the daughter of Zion, it's Holy of Holies, unto thee shall it come. The kingdom shall come to the daughter of Jerusalem. Why are you now crying aloud? For pangs have taken thee as a woman in travail. Be in pain, labor to bring forth, O daughter of Zion, like a woman in travail. Thou shalt go forth out of the city and dwell in the field, and there thou shalt be delivered. Really interesting imagery. Okay. Turn too many pages here. Remember, as you look at the parable of the wise and foolish virgins, you're kind of getting a play on the wise and foolish woman of Proverbs 7 to 9 and the choices they would make. Remember that the foolish woman is told by the bridegroom, I know you not. There will be no consummation of our marriage. All 10 of the virgins in the parable are the bride. How prepared are they for their own marriage? Jerusalem is called the mother of us all in Galatians chapter 4, verse 26. The queen, this is Psalm 45, and the word for queen here is not the usual word we associate with queen, which is malakah. Melech is king, so you take melech and add the feminine ending, and you get queen, malakah. But that is also the word translated as kingdom, because where does a king get a kingdom from? Who does he rule over? His kids. And they only come to him through his wife. Malakah, the queen, is the kingdom. And Psalm 45 has beautiful metaphors about the queen who is seated on the throne. And her husband, the king, comes with his sword. So you've got the bride and the bridegroom coming with a sword. That's Revelation chapter 19. Interestingly, there is a passage in the Ascension of Isaiah, which is an apocryphal book written in New Testament times, describing the queen as Gibborah. It's kind of an interesting word. You can see it's Gibor, or Geber, with a feminine ending on it. And Geber, as in Geber-El, or Gabriel, means mighty man, a mighty warrior. So in Revelation 19, you get the mighty warrior coming with all of his army of warriors, but you also have Gibborah, the feminine version, which is the queen and the marriage of the bride. This never gets translated as a mighty female warrior. There's no reason why it couldn't. but that's not how men have chosen to translate it. It's fascinating to me to see that the gender that a word is associated with will change how you translate that word. Not anything in the word itself, but how your culture looks at the other gender. That's so true in the book of Ruth, where you have Boaz as a mighty man of valor. And that's a translation of the word chayil. Same word is used of Ruth. She is a isha chayil, which is a virtuous woman. And in Proverbs, at the end of Proverbs, you have that wonderful 22-line poem. I know it's 22 lines because it's alphabetical. So each line starts with the next letter, consecutive letter of the alphabet. And it begins, who can find a virtuous woman? For her price is above rubies. And that's Isha Chayil. And there's only two women that phrase is used of. One is in that proverb, and the other is Ruth. But the same word for Boaz is not virtuous, it's mighty man of valor. What does that say about our cultures and what we value about the different people in the culture? The Ascension of Isaiah has Giborah, the queen, this mighty woman, seated on the left hand of the Father. Who's on the right hand? Well, their son, right? That's where Jehovah is always located. Where Jesus is on the right hand of the Father. But Giborah is on the left. So you see all three members of that family. In Isaiah 10, it talks about the woman as a grove and as a forest, is the translation there, and as the menorah. Men are described as a fruitful field in the same verse, or a close verse. I hope you see how that relates back to the book of Genesis, where we had on day 3 grass and herbs and seed and fruit trees created. And the parallel with that second half of day 3 is the second half of day 6, in which we get males and females. Males that bear seed, like the fruits of the fields are seeds, wheat, barley, rye, and women who bear fruit. Malachi says, the Son of Righteousness will rise with healing in her wings, in the Hebrew. So you might think of the woman clothed with the sun in Revelation. She is, okay, Isaiah 49. Zion said, the Lord hath forsaken me. My Lord hath forgotten me. Can a woman forget her suckling child, that she should not have compassion on the son of her womb? Did you just notice that God, the Lord, the bridegroom, is being symbolized as a nursing mother? We don't often see female imagery that blatantly associated with Jehovah. Yea, they may forget, says Jehovah, but I will not forget thee. I have engraven thee upon the palms of my hands. So in Revelation 19, verses 7 to 9, let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come. The wife hath made herself ready. To her was granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white, for fine linen is the righteousness of the saints. And he said, blessed are they which are called to the marriage supper of the Lamb. So we finally get to that. Now, I forgot when we were talking
Which
about...
reference was that?
I'm sorry?
Where were you on that one?
Oh, that's Revelation 19, and it's verses 7 to 9, describing the marriage. But before the marriage, we need to see what happened to Babylon. Because Babylon falls. And repeatedly the prophets will say, "Come ye out of Babylon." That is what our prophets are saying today. It's what your local stake president and bishop are saying. It's what your Relief Society president is saying to you. Come out of Babylon, lest you be destroyed with her. So this is chapter 18. Babylon the Great is fallen. Nations have drunk the wine of the wrath of her fornication, and the kings of the earth which committed fornication with her, and the merchants of the earth that waxed rich through the abundance of her delicacies are lost. I heard another voice from heaven saying, "Come ye out of her, my people, that ye may not be partakers in her sins, and receive not her plagues. Her sins have reached to heaven. She hath glorified herself. She said in her heart, I sit as a queen." Can you see how this is just the feminine version of Lucifer in chapter 14 of Isaiah? The king of Babylon. The kings of the earth who committed fornication and lived deliciously with her shall bewail her, lament her when they see the smoke of her burning. Verse 10, standing afar off for fear of her torment. They don't want to get involved in this burning, right? Alas, alas, the great city Babylon, that mighty city, for in 1 hour is thy judgment come. And the merchants of the earth shall weep and mourn over her, for no one buys their merchandise anymore. I find that one of the most ironic statements in the book of Revelation. And what is her merchandise? The merchandise of gold and silver and precious stones, of pearls, fine linen, and purple and silk and scarlet, of fine wood, of all manner of vessels, of ivory and vessels of precious wood, of brass, iron, and marble, cinnamon and odors and ointments and frankincense, wine, oil, fine flour, wheat, beasts and sheep, and horses and chariots and slaves, and the souls of men. I don't know if you noticed, but virtually all of those were meant to be used in the temple, but have been prostituted by the merchants of the earth for profit. And you'll notice what they're selling here. They're selling people and the souls of men. The merchants of these things which were made rich by her shall stand afar off for fear of her torment, weeping and wailing, and say, Alas, alas, that great city that was clothed in linen and purple and scarlet, and decked in gold and precious stones and pearls. Alas, for that great city, she is made desolate. Do you see the covenant curse? Desolation. And your carcasses are going to lay on the ground, and the birds of the air are going to come and eat. That's the promise of Deuteronomy 28, where it talks about famine and pestilence and the sword and all these terrible things that are coming upon those who do not keep their covenants. Okay. But you caught that everything is for sale in Babylon. But, you know, it mentions the souls of men. Souls really cannot be taken away from you. Souls have to be given by their owner. That individual has to have made the choice. and exchanging their soul. What have you given in exchange for your soul? Is a few coins worth your immortal life? Or, the quotation, what is man profited if he gain the whole world but lose his soul? In Omni, it talks about laying your soul upon the altar, a broken heart and a contrite spirit as an offering to God. Which one are we doing with our lives? And with the destruction of Babylon, which began at the time of Babel, that's chapter 5, down to chapter 11, the Tower of Babel, we finally see an end to the choice made by one of the two brothers, which is Cain, who chose to murder and get gain. And the evil in this world has behind it always greed. And that's Babylon. The question becomes for all of us, how much are we participating in Babylon? And that's a question we have to stop and ask every day. When I'm buying things at the store, do I really need to buy new clothes every year? And the old clothes pile up and are so abundant that we fill shipping containers full of them and ship them off to Africa, where they destroy the local economy. Well, how might you participate more in Zion in terms of our purchases? How we're spending our money? I think that's an important question for us to ask. What about music? Or books, or movies, or TV shows, or how much money do we spend on watching violence? Every single mention of violence that I can find, and the Hebrew word for violence, I think I mentioned before, is Hamas. It's always wickedness. Always wickedness. All right. I was supposed to put this up an hour ago. There's the women. But you'll get that in a handout. But this is a different version of the women. This is the women in 1 Nephi, chapters 11 to 14. I heard the authors of a new book speak on Saturday. It's called The Seven Gospels, The Many Lives of Christ in the Book of Mormon. Adam Miller and Rosalind Welch are the authors. And one of the Gospels that they refer to in the book of Seven Gospels is the Gospel of Mary. And I thought, have I missed something about Mary other than the two mentions of her in 1 Nephi chapter 11 as talking about the tree? So I went back and reread Nephi's interpreted vision of his father, where the angel interprets what he's seen. And it was startling, to say the least, how much of this vision is the book of Revelation. Now, I don't know why that surprised me, because at the end of the vision, it says, that's all you get to write about, Nephi, because this guy, the apostle of the Lamb, he's the one that has permission. Let me find it, it's in chapter 14 here. Okay, here's verse 17. See if this doesn't sound like the book of Revelation. The day cometh that the wrath of God is poured out upon the mother of harlots, which is the great and abominable church, whose founder is the devil, that the work of the Father may commence in preparing the way for the fulfilling of his covenants, which he hath made to his people who are the house of Israel. And the angel said, look, and I looked, and I beheld a man who was dressed in a white robe, and this is not Jesus this time. It is one of the 12 apostles of the Lamb. Behold, he shall see and write the remainder of these things, and he shall write concerning the end of the world. And the things that he writes were, when they proceeded out of the mouth of a Jew, were plain and pure and precious and easy to the understanding of men. You're seeing a comparison of the Bible with the tree and with all that is good and right and precious when it first came forth. I think that was fascinating. Anyway, as you look at this again, you'll see the two women, the two cities. It only mentions Mary, not by name. She doesn't actually get named. That's not until the book of Mosiah and Alma. And it's Alma in both Mosiah and Alma who mentions her. But it's talking about the virgin, which I found fascinating because first, well, let's go and read just a little bit of chapter 11. What desirest thou, says the angel? I desire to see the things my father saw. Believest thou that thy father saw the tree of which he hath spoken? Of all the things in that entire vision, that angel starts with the tree. I will show thee a sign. After thou hast beheld the tree which bore the fruit which thy father tasted, thou shalt then behold a man descending out of heaven. And I looked, and I beheld a tree. It was like unto the tree which my father had seen, and the beauty thereof was far and beyond, yea, exceeding all beauty, and the whiteness thereof did exceed the whiteness of the driven snow. A tree which was precious above all. And the angel said, look for the interpretation of the tree. Do you want to know the interpretation thereof? Look. And I looked, and I saw the city of Jerusalem, and I beheld the city of Nazareth, and in the city of Nazareth I beheld a virgin, and she was exceedingly fair and white. She is most beautiful and fair above all other virgins. Knowest thou the condescension of God? I said, I know that he loves his children. That's all I know about God. Behold, the virgin whom thou seest is the mother of the Son of God, after the manner of the flesh. And it came to pass that she was carried away in the Spirit. This is almost like the woman in chapter 12, who was carried away by the Spirit into the wilderness. And then the next time you see her, she has a child in her arms. And I looked and beheld the virgin again bearing a child in her arms. Behold, the Lamb of God. Knowest thou the meaning of the tree? And I thought a lot about this, and I realized that the tree is the woman, but the fruit of the tree, which we eat, which is joyous above all things, is the body of the Lamb. It is the child, through which we receive the forgiveness. It's sacrament, right? And forgiveness of sins through that child. So we've got the tree, and I thought it was interesting that she's still called the virgin after she has given birth. That's usually not how we see most things, but we'll go with it. And she got carried away, but you'll see the Bible as if it was a virgin when it first came forth. The virgin city of Jerusalem and the Bible, plain and precious and things most joyous to the soul, bringing good tidings of joy. This is a Christmas moment, of course. Every time in Scripture that they say you may rejoice, want you to have joy, I bring you good tidings of great joy, it's associated with having received a forgiveness of sins. So when the shepherds are shown the Lamb of God who has just been born, that they are to witness the birth of, because that's their job, is to witness which lamb is the firstborn. That one has to be given to the temple. That one is holy and belongs to God. They usually will put a red cord around the neck of the firstborn lamb. It is their job to tell the priests which ones are the firstborn. So, of course, as the shepherds leave, they tell everyone about the birth of the lamb. But the angels bring good tidings of great joy, which shall be to all people, because a Redeemer who can forgive your sins has just been born. Then it goes to, in verse 25, the fountain of living waters. Let me find that. I was led to the fountain of living waters, or to the tree of life. I've thought for several times about how is a tree the same as a fountain of living water. And I was thinking about trees and their roots suck the water up out of the ground and pump it up the trunk hundreds of feet in the air, which I'm still not sure how they do, because you can only go 32 feet pumping, right? A column of water. So they overcome that resistance and they pump water up, out through the branches, out to the leaves, where the water comes out of the leaves, transpiration into our air, and we get humidity and water in the air. And thus we get rain. All good things. And the tree is a fountain of living water. But just as the woman bears fruit, women have always been associated with water. It's not always a positive association. Water is Ma'im, and when you had Miriam and the bitter waters, they healed the bitter waters by throwing a tree in it, in Exodus. That's kind of interesting. But if you think about a woman giving birth, she literally becomes a fountain of living water as that water breaks and the water flows forth. And if you've read Pearl Buck's The Good Earth, which I read when I was about 12, it describes her sitting, the woman in China, sitting in their fields, nursing their baby. And milk is just pouring out of the breast that is not being nursed. And I thought, oh, come on. Well, then I had a kid, and I realized, oh, this is real. This is how it works. Women become a fountain. It's when you stop and think about the positive aspects of this imagery, it's pretty powerful. And it all is associated with the covenant. Okay.
Take off the thing, take off the, and bring that around.
Okay. Do we know why it's gone?
Your battery's there. It's been an hour and a half.
Brand new batteries. Okay. Let's go with this. Mary, we're going to need your recording.
Push another button behind you.
Turn it higher. That better?
Yes.
Okay. All of this brings us to chapter 19. Babylon is gone. And now we say, hallelujah. Salvation, glory, honor, and power. Hallelujah. The voice came out of the throne, praise to our God. We heard the voice of many waters saying, hallelujah. The Lord God omnipotent reigneth. If you have not been to the Messiah this year, there will be one on Friday and Saturday night of this week over in Maple Mountain. And it's free, and it's a fundraiser. If you want more information about it, I'll be glad to tell you. We go every year.
Not this weekend's 15th, 16th. Is there not?
Is it?
My
You're
son
right.
is playing in it.
You're right. It is 15, 16. It's next weekend. This weekend is other things on Friday and Saturday. Yes. 15 and 16. And the one on the 15th is the full Messiah. The one on the 16th is a shortened version that they encourage children to come to that night because they know there's no way they're going to sit through the 3.5 hours on Friday. But they do a great job, and they often will use a harpsichord, and they have great vocals. It's good stuff. But the next 3 verses aren't in the Messiah, but they could be. Let us be glad and rejoice and give honor to him, for the marriage of the Lamb is come. And his wife hath made herself ready. To her is granted that she should be arrayed in fine linen, clean and white. This is for the marriage supper of the Lamb. And that's the female part of Revelation 19. Then we get the second version of the coming of the bridegroom. Before he came as the bridegroom, the Lord God, omnipotent. And now, verse 11, I saw heaven opened, and behold a white horse. And he that sat upon him was called Faithful and True, and in righteousness doth he judge and make war. His eyes were as a flame of fire. On his head were many crowns. Can you see this as a contrast to the beast that has 7 heads and 10 crowns? And he had a name written that no man knew but he himself. He was clothed in a vesture dipped in blood, and his name is called the Word of God. This is John. In the beginning was the Word. And the armies which were in heaven followed him upon white horses. They were clothed in fine linen, white and clean. And out of his mouth goeth a sharp sword, probably 2-edged, that he should smite the nations, and he will rule them with a rod of iron. He treadeth the winepress of the fierceness and wrath of Almighty God, which is why he's in red. Because he's been treading the winepress, which is Gethsemane. And he hath on his vesture and on his thigh a name written, King of Kings and Lord of Lords. And here's the list of all the verses we're not going to go through today. You can. Introducing you to the King of Kings and the Lord of Lords, and the day of his coming, the great day of the Lord. That's the day we're talking about. And it's over and over and over. I'll just read you one, and that's in Zechariah, which is at the end of the Old Testament. You should read Zechariah again. Chapter 14, last chapter. Behold, the day of the Lord cometh. Then shall the Lord go forth and fight against against the nations when he hath fought in the day of battle. The Lord my God will come, and all his saints with him. This is that day. And with him are all the saints dressed in white. This is the image that they used for that is in Come Follow Me this year. When we get to this chapter of Revelation in your Come Follow Me manual, it has this picture. And there's all the hosts of heaven, because he is the Lord of hosts, which means army. Yahweh Sabaoth. Now, the robe that both the bride and the army, they're both dressed in fine linen, which is what priests wear. So they're both dressed in white. I thought you would like to know about the Jewish tradition. A kittel is a Yiddish word for the white robe that is worn on special occasions by Ashkenazic Jews. That means Northern Europeans, like Tevye. Okay, that's Northern European Jews. The kittel is worn on the high holy days of Rosh Hashanah. That's the coming of the king. What are they wearing? The king has come, right? And on Yom Kippur, the Day of Atonement. It is also used as a burial shroud, providing simple dress that assures equality for all in death. The wearing of the kittel on the high holy days is symbolically connected with that burial shroud, and the verse, our sins shall be made as white as snow, which is Isaiah chapter 1. According to many traditions, a bridegroom wears a kittel on his wedding day. And if you want to see this, you can go online. I got all of this from gotjudaica.com, which is a site at which you can buy one of these robes. They look like a very thin white button-up robe with a sash around the waist, like someone might wear as a robe over their pajamas. They put this robe on over their street clothing. When you go to a synagogue on the Day of Atonement, on Yom Kippur, if you have a ticket given to you by friends, you will see that the rabbi and others in the congregation have chosen to wear the kittel. And then over it they put their prayer shawl as well. Many Jews will wear the kittel when leading the Passover Seder. In some communities, the cantor wears it during special services. The cantor is the guy who sings the scriptures. So all this liturgical singing that's going on in the book of Revelation is the cantor. They're probably dressed in white. Especially the prayers for rain and for dew. The white color is said to symbolize purity, which partly explains its use during weddings. It is felt to signify unity with the bride, who of course wears white, and the beginning of a new life together. You want to think about white robes that are worn on special occasions, that are worn at weddings, and that we may be buried in. And realize that this is the same clothing in a way that is part of the culture. I will send out this handout, which is talking about being clothed in Scripture. I will put on righteousness. It clothes me. Let the priest be clothed with righteousness. I will rejoice in the Lord. My soul shall be joyful in the Lord, for he hath clothed me with the garments of salvation. He hath covered me with a robe of righteousness. It's his righteousness, right? As a bridegroom decketh himself with ornaments, and a bride adorneth herself with jewels. Isaiah 61, talking about the great day of the Lord and the coming of the city of Jerusalem. So here's some comments, not only about the people dressed in white and the marriage of the Lamb and his bride and the coming of the King with his forces. They're the same thing. It's the same people, two different images. And they're going to have a meal. And the meal is presented as the marriage feast of the Lamb or the great supper of our God. It isn't too attractive as you read about this meal. Isaiah 45:25, thus saith the Lord, even the captives of the mighty shall be taken away. The prey of the terrible will be delivered. I will contend with him that contendeth with thee, and I will save thy children. I will feed them that oppress thee with their own flesh. They shall be drunken with their own blood as with sweet wine. And all flesh shall know that I, the Lord, am thy Savior and thy Redeemer, the mighty one of Jacob. Either the wicked eat their own flesh and blood, or all the birds of the air come and feast upon them. The carcasses of this people shall be meat for the fowls of the air. I will give thee unto the ravenous birds. You will be as a sacrifice on the mountains of Israel, that you may eat meat and drink blood. I find it absolutely fascinating that the two sides of this meal, you either choose to partake of the body and blood of Christ, or if you rely on the arm of flesh, you can eat your own body and blood. If you don't rely on Christ for salvation, you're left to yourself. How effective are you going to be? It's quite an interesting meal. The important piece about it, this is the last verse of the book of Zechariah. It shall come to pass that everyone that is left of the nation shall go up to Jerusalem from year to year to worship the King, the Lord of hosts, and keep the Feast of Tabernacles. And in that day there shall be no more Canaanites in the house of the Lord. Canaanite is the Hebrew word for merchant. So we see the end of the merchants, but we all come for this big meal. The final thing that I want to point out is that both of these moments in chapter 19 are the fulfillment of the symbolism and the imagery of the covenant making in the Old Testament, where men and women covenant differently. Men, you can see Genesis chapter 15 or chapter 17 with Abraham. Men cut covenant with God by taking an animal and cutting it in pieces. And then, according to Jeremiah chapter 34, they cut an animal in pieces, and then they pass between the pieces as they promise God that they will be faithful to him in battle. And in exchange for their faithfulness to God, he will give them land and seed. Those were the exact same terms that my great-grandfather was given in Sweden when he was a part of the Swedish army. The Duke was responsible to give him somewhere to live and food to eat and how to take care of his kids as long as he came when the Duke called him to battle. That's how recent, this is feudalism, right? Since the time of the Bible on down to our day. The women, however, and then the men in chapter 17 will make this covenant by cutting off a piece of themselves in circumcision. They cut covenant with God. Women don't do that and are not shown fighting in the army. Instead, you go to Ezekiel chapter 16, which is the story of my great-grandfather's daughter in Sweden. And it's the story of the birth of the nation of Israel as a newborn baby girl coming out of the captivity in Egypt, passing in through the Red Sea as the waters of her birth. Thy birth and thy nativity, in the day that thou wast born, thy navel was not cut, neither wast thou washed in water to supple thee, thou wast not salted at all, nor swallowed at all. There was no eye to pity thee, to do any of these things to thee, to have compassion upon thee. Thou wast cast out in the open field to the loathing of thy person in the day that thou wast born. And then when I passed by, the young, virile warrior god, I saw thee polluted in thine own blood, and I said unto thee, when thou wast in my blood, live. I said unto thee, when thou wast in my blood, live. And by the way, that's the same word as Eve. Eve is life, so he has just named this baby that he has rescued. I have caused thee to multiply as the bud of the field, and thou art increased and waxen great, and art come to excellent ornaments. Thy breasts are fashioned, thy hair is grown, where before thou wast naked and bare. Now when I passed by thee and looked upon thee, thy time was as the time of love. The girl has gone through puberty. And I spread my skirt over thee, and covered thy nakedness. I swore unto thee, and entered into a covenant with thee, saith the Lord God, and thou becamest mine. The only covenant women enter into in the Old Testament is a covenant of marriage. I washed thee with water. I thoroughly washed away thy blood from thee, and I anointed thee with oil. I clothed thee with embroidered work, and shod thee with badger skin. I girded thee with fine linen, and covered thee with silk. I decked thee with ornaments and bracelets on your hands, a chain on thy neck. I put a jewel on thy forehead, earrings in thine ears, a beautiful crown upon thy head. Thou wast decked with gold and silver, thy raiment, linen and silk and embroidered work. Thou didst eat fine flour and honey and oil. Thou wast exceedingly beautiful, and thou didst prosper into a kingdom. And thy renown went forth among the heathen for thy beauty, for it was perfect through my comeliness, which I put upon thee, saith the Lord God. That's how women covenant. And so the culmination of the covenant is the marriage feast of the Lamb and his bride. Men covenant with a lord to be faithful to him in battle. So when he comes riding on the white horse, dressed in red, having atoned for our sins, he's now coming to get all those who have oppressed his saints, and all the armies of heaven come with him. And they're all dressed in white. At the Rosh Hashanah, the coming of the King. It fascinates me how John has woven together and brought to an end in the book of Revelation all of this absolutely important covenant making and the imagery of the whole Old Testament. You can read Psalm 45 to see the same dual imagery of the bride and the King of Kings as the warrior. Amazing. And so, the final chapter of Revelation, we get or two chapters, it's one chapter probably in the original. I saw a new heaven and a new earth, for the first heaven and earth had passed away, and there was no more sea. I saw the holy city, New Jerusalem coming down out of heaven, prepared as a bride adorned for her husband. The city, the virgin city of Jerusalem, the daughter of the mountain of the Lord, is his bride. And God will wipe away all their tears. There shall be no more death, neither sorrow nor crying, neither shall it be any more pain, and all these things are passed away. Come hither, says the angel, and I will show thee the bride, the Lamb's wife. And he carried me away in spirit to a great and high mountain. Did you see Jesus being carried away in the spirit to a great and high mountain? The holy city of Jerusalem descending out of heaven unto God, from God. And then it describes the city as dressed in all of those beautiful stones that are on the high priest's breastplate, and all of the beautiful clothing that the high priest and the woman in Ezekiel 16, the bride, wears. The temple had 12 gates and 12 pearls and transparent glass, and we talked about how the city has the 12 tribes on the 4 sides of it. It says there is no temple there, but the reality is that all of it is a temple. And more important than being a temple, it is all the Holy of Holies. The measurements of the city of Jerusalem are 1,500 miles on a side, wide, deep, and high. It is a cube. We've talked about a cube before. And that is the shape of the Holy of Holies. As all of this comes, out of the city pours the waters of life, pure as crystal, and the trees of life growing along the sides. We have Eden again. All the language is one. Zion, the city of Enoch, has been restored. And all the blessings, the covenant blessings that have been offered, are now being made real. It's my prayer that at this Christmas season, we'll think about the Lamb of God who has been born and what the future will bring when he comes again. May we be found clothed in white at his coming, is my prayer for all of us, in the name of Jesus Christ. Amen.